In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a man that swears black and blue that he was abducted by an alien named Ausso One and taken 163,000 light miles away to its home planet. Hello and welcome back, or welcome to my channel. If you don't know what's going on here, I am a horror artist and I like to draw what I talk about. I get a bit of inspiration from the story and I draw something that comes to mind. Sometimes it's not exactly what the story is about, but it's an inspiration from the story, but most of the time it is directly relating to the story that I am talking about. Now, nothing in these videos is meant to be insensitive to anyone that is mentioned or the families involved, but I will be held accountable for my art. But if you are a sensitive person, I recommend turning off and not coming anywhere near my channel at all. With that being said, let's move on with the video. The Carl Higdon Abduction and Return. One afternoon in autumn, on the 25th of October 1974, a man named Carl Higdon left his home to go hunting for elk in the Medicine Bowl National Park in Wyoming, roughly 80 kilometers from where his home was in Rawlins. Carl was 41 years old, a husband and a father of 4, and an oil well driller that worked at the AM Well Service Company in Riverton, and had been there for 20 years, working his way up the ranks to becoming a foreman. Unfortunately, the recession hit hard and food prices became expensive, so he decided to take a day off and go hunting to fill his freezer up for the winter to feed his family. Carl was actually heading to McCarthy Canyon until he decided to do a good deed and help some fellow hunters with their van that was broken down on the side of the road. They informed him that there was better elk over at the Medicine Bowl National Park. He thanked the hunters and headed there. He arrived at the park later that arvo around 4 p.m. He got out, put his thermals on, rugged up, got his rifle ready, poured himself a cup of coffee, and happened to run into a friend, Gary Eaton, who wanted to go higher into the park. So they started walking together initially, and then soon separated. Carl decided to explore a secluded area behind a hill. It wasn't long until Carl came across a small pack of elk containing 5 of them. He got into position, raised his Magnum rifle. Apparently these kind of guns have a pretty savage kickback if you're not careful, and aimed for the big male about a few hundred yards away. Carl at this point did not know what was about to happen to him, and his life would never be the same again. Carl pulled the trigger and expected to hear and feel the rifle, but there was nothing. No noise, no kickback. It was all completely silent, like all the sound had gone and he was completely deaf. What startled him even more was when he watched the 7mm bullet leave the chamber of his gun at slow motion, got to about 50 feet and just fell into the snowy ground, like it had hit a solid wall. Not only was it disturbingly quiet, he could feel a sense of electricity in the air and his skin tingled like static. After recovering from the shock, he went to retrieve the bullet only to find it completely flat, like it had hit a stone wall. He put the bullet in his pocket and went to walk off, and that's when all the sound came back and he heard twigs breaking and snapping in the forest. He turned around and was confronted with a humanoid being that had odd deformities. He thought at first that it was another hunter, but when he studied the being that stepped out from the shadows, he was terrified. He wished he had gone to McCarthy Canyon at that point. Carl described the being as being dressed in a black tight one-piece similar to a scuba diver swimsuit with harness-like straps crossing at the chest area, metallic belt with a 6-pointed star in the colour yellow with symbols that could not be identified. It appeared to be male, had no ears, small eyes, no eyebrows, thick coarse straw-like hair on its head that was in the shape of a dome, 3 large teeth, no lips with just a slit for a mouth, antennas, and his face just blended straight into his neck. So basically no neck. And no jawbone. His skin was a jaundiced colour, and he stood well over 6 foot tall. He had long arms with a drill-like point as a quote-unquote hand on one arm and nothing from the wrist down on the other. He started to move towards Carl, and Carl got even more scared, but then the creature turned around and said to him in English, "How are you doing?" Carl, still freaking the fuck out, responded with, "Pretty good." Apparently the alien being asked Carl if he was hungry. Carl didn't respond, but the being sent a floating clear packet of 4 pills inside over to him. The alien said to him to take one. Carl said he never took anything, even headache tablets, but he said he felt like he wasn't in control, and something made him take one. He put the other 3 in the pocket of his jacket. The pill was said to last 4 days, and it was 4 days worth of food. Then the being said to Carl, "I'm Ausso One." Carl then saw something behind Ausso One, a square box-like object that was transparent, just sitting on the ground. No entrance, no landing gear, no legs. Carl said it was only 5 feet by 7 feet long. Then apparently Ausso One said to Carl, "Do you want to come along?" Carl didn't know what to do, so he just shrugged his shoulders. But all of a sudden, the alien pointed his pointy quote-unquote hand at him, and the next minute, they were in the cube craft. Carl was having a TARDIS experience because he didn't know how he was fitting in the cube with Ausso One and 2 other beings. At this stage, Carl was feeling dizzy and swore to God that the pill did something to him, maybe shrunk him or numbed his senses to cope with the experience. Then he noticed that the group of Elks he was going to hunt were also in the cube craft as well, and were floating in what appeared to be suspended animation. He happened to notice that he too was unable to move, and he was fastened in a bucket seat and bound by his arms and legs. One of the other aliens then put a helmet on Carl's head with wires protruding from it, and then Ausso One telepathically controlled all the 3 levers in the craft, and they took off. They then hovered over Carl's vehicle, and Ausso One pointed at it, and it just disappeared. They took off again and left Earth, and Carl could see planet-like orbs through the craft's clear floor. They were flying to the alien being's home planet that was 163,000 light miles, and yes, not light years, actual light miles, from Earth. When they arrived, Carl saw a massive tower-like umbrella-shaped structure with rotating bright lights that hurt his eyes. He also apparently heard a vibrating sound or buzzing. Carl ended up complaining, saying that the lights were burning him and he wanted them to stop, but the other being in the craft said to him, "We have the same problem with your sun. It burns us too." They landed at the base of the tower and noticed through the clear walls of the craft that there was 5 other human beings outside. 2 of them were about 11, the other 2 were 18, and there was a man around 50 years old. They were all talking amongst themselves. Ausso One escorted Carl into the tower, went up an elevator to the room where he was told to stand on a small podium. Carl noticed that the aliens did not walk, that they hovered just above the ground. While on the platform, a glass-type shield came out of the wall, hovering in front of him, and scanned his body for about 5 minutes, like a medical device. Then the glass shield disappeared, and Carl was informed that he was going to be returned to Earth, where Ausso One had met him, because the scanning showed that he did not meet their requirements. Ausso One escorted Carl back to the elevator, out of the tower, and back into the clear craft. Ausso One apparently was admiring Carl's rifle and would love to have kept the quote-unquote primitive weapon, but he couldn't, as it was against protocol. He handed the rifle back to Carl and took the food pills from him, and they were moving once again back to Earth. At this point in time, it took no time at all to get back to Earth. He saw his ute, but his ute was 10 kilometers away from where he had parked it, in impossible terrain. Ausso One turned to Carl and said, "We'll be seeing you," and was floated down to Earth, but he ended up on the edge of a slope and fell down 9 feet, injuring himself. Carl was disorientated, in shock, and was aimlessly walking and even passed his ute without realizing. He did eventually realize and backtracked, but he was cold, shivering, crying, and didn't have a feeling of his own identity. Once he got to his ute and heard the crackling of a CB radio in a female's voice, he told the female that he was lost, sick, and needed help as he had no idea where he was and how to get out of there. A search party was sent by the local sheriff and Carl's wife. Because of the terrain being difficult, they did not find him until midnight. During their recovery mission of Carl, Carl's wife Marjorie and 2 other deputies witnessed lights in the sky, flashing green, red, and white. When they arrived at Carl's destination, they were shocked to find that his ute was deep in mud and in a location that would not have been able to get there by driving, so they had no idea how he got there. Not even the search party could get their vehicles there. No tyre tracks even led to the ute. It was like it was placed there like a matchbox car from the sky. Carl was apparently screaming in the ute, "They took my Elks! They took my Elks!" He didn't even recognise his own wife, as he was in so much shock. They came up with the master plan to get the ute out, and then took Carl to hospital to be monitored at around 2:30 a.m. It wouldn't be for another day that Carl started to snap out of his shock and started recalling some of the adventure. He had suffered nervous exhaustion, bloodshot strained eyes, and injuries from falling 9 feet, but the doctors were shocked to find that Carl's blood work came back extraordinary. He had nutrient-rich blood, and all the scarring on his lungs from contracting tuberculosis in 1958 was all gone like he had never had it. He also had no kidney stones anymore that had been painful and bugging him for a while. His doctors said that he was in super condition. He told the authorities what happened to him, and they then went and informed the newspapers, the press, and the ufologists, even though they were even skeptical themselves. But Carl's wife never doubted him because of what she saw that night out there. Carl's appetite apparently didn't return for another 3 days. So think of the pill that he took that was supposed to be food for 4 days. So he's already recovered for the first day and sort of snapped out of a bit of a shock. But then 3 days after that is when his appetite returned. So yeah, it was 4 days. And he complained that his body felt like he had been ripped apart and put back together, maybe from the time shifts. Once Carl was released from hospital and sent home, Marjorie did his laundry and found the flattened 7mm bullet in his pocket. Marjorie gave it to Carl and he took it straight down to the sheriff, and even he was baffled as he'd never seen a bullet do that before. The copper casing was turned inside out and the lead slug was gone. ARPO was called, which is Aerial Phenomena Research Organisation, to investigate the bullet. They sent Dr. Walter Walker, who was a metallurgy consultant. They combed the area where Carl supposedly had met Ausso One, but they never found the slug. On the 29th of October 1974, the Rawlins Daily Times published Carl's story, and it went 1970s viral. Carl was still pretty distressed by it all, so the ARPO investigators suggested that Carl get hypnosis therapy to recall the adventure, as Carl struggled to remember a lot. He went into hypnosis regression and reclaimed everything that happened to him. He even stated that Ausso One came to Earth to hunt fish, as they absolutely loved fish. So that is why Ausso One was in the area at the same time Carl was. The black suits were apparently there to protect them from the sun, and the elks that they collected were for breeding purposes back on their planet. He then came to the conclusion that he wasn't quote-unquote suitable because Carl had had a vasectomy, and he thinks that the reason why they didn't want him is because he was not fertile and was not able to produce children anymore. Dr. R. Leo Sprinkle was the one that hypnotized Carl, and he was assisted by MUFON agents Rick Kenyon and Robert Nankes. It actually took 2 attempts to hypnotize Carl, but by the end of it all, Sprinkle made sure that Carl would remember his ordeal and would not be scared by it anymore. Carl said he was followed for weeks after the quote-unquote abduction by the green lights witnessed by the deputy and his wife that night. In 1978, Carl was asked to take a lie detector test to see if he was lying about the whole event, but it came back truthful, and Dr. Greenberg, that conducted the test, stated that Carl was not lying and something definitely happened that night, or he honestly believed that something happened again. Unfortunately, Carl did get called a fraud and that he was only just talking about the case to be famous. But with the reports from the sheriff's office, hospital reports, and what his wife witnessed, it points to him not making it up. Plus, the trauma he suffered for years after. Even the night that Carl was abducted, people in nearby homes also allegedly witnessed and reported strange lights in the sky. So tell me your thoughts on this story. Do you believe that this really did happen to Carl, or do you think that he was lying? I'm leaning towards that it may have happened just because of the evidence, the bullets, the sheriff's reports, the witnesses of the lights, and the ute. Not to mention the health benefits that he ended up with. I would have loved to have gotten the name of the planet. Obviously, they didn't end up telling Carl, but that would have been awesome to find out. All I can say is if I was ever abducted, I'm going to request that they fix all my issues, my anxiety, my depression, my nervous system issues, my severe GORD, and my sinus issues. And I would honestly expect a TED Talk on the secrets of the universe. Maybe that's probably why they haven't abducted me, because I have so many questions that I would hit them with. Maybe these aliens should be coming down here and curing people of cancer and shit, doing the jobs of the health that the health system just doesn't do. It's just big pharma keeping us sick so they have repeat customers. The world is run by fuckwits that we know have a cure for cancer, but they just won't release it because apparently it's not profitable. But anyways, I won't go right into that right now. Carl passed away on the 26th of January 2022 from pneumonia at 88 years old. In 2018, him and his wife celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. And him and his wife were long-term residents of Marble Falls in Texas, where they moved to live out the rest of their lives. Carl's wife wrote a book about the whole experience that Carl went through, and you can actually purchase that. I'll have a link down below if you are interested. I must admit, stories like this make me question some of the missing people in the missing persons cases. People that just, leave their cars completely abandoned anywhere with the keys still in it, or, are never seen again. Sometimes I feel as though that these people have been abducted and they have been what they wanted, so they've never returned them. And that's, that does run through my head, that all these missing people may not have died here on Earth, but they may have just been taken. And I'm curious to know too, if Carl had what they needed, would he have been returned? Would he have come back, or would he have been just one of those missing people? That's what I want to know. Let me know your thoughts on the whole thing. Now, the illustration that I decided to do for this story today is I decided to do my own version of Ausso One. And I came up with this being that had all the description that was mentioned. I accidentally put lips on him for some reason though, so he does have a little bit of lip going on. I don't know why I did that, but I don't know, just felt right at the time. But yeah, this is my version of Ausso One, and I also decided to put in there the Elks heads cut off, wrapped in like a rope. They're all tied together with a rope, and he's got the male down below that is the one that Carl was actually aiming for. So I decided to do his head separate to sort of state that that's the elk that Carl was after. Just having the heads, the five heads of the Elks just sort of hovering there in midair with Ausso One, basically. So anyway, that is the end of my video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you watch whatever is left of the rest of this video to see how the illustration turned out. And if you like this kind of content, like and subscribe, turn on notifications, whatever it is that keeps you in contact with me and lets you know when I upload. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!